Imagine waking up one day and realizing your workplace has turned into the biggest traveling circus in the history of sports. The empty seats are entirely gone. The quiet, relaxed arenas replaced by deafening, ear-splitting roars of 18,000 screaming fans. The chartered flights, the overwhelming security details, the paparazzi at every hotel, and the endless, suffocating media debates on national television. Welcome to the new reality of the Indiana fever. Welcome to the absolute madness of the Caitlin Clark effect. But while the entire world cameras are overwhelmingly zoomed in on number 22, there is a completely different, much deeper story unfolding in the shadows of the spotlight. What is it actually like to share the locker room, share the court, and share the immense crushing pressure that comes with playing alongside a generational basketball icon? We have heard the mainstream media's narrative. We have heard the aggressive haters on social media. We have heard the analysts screaming on daytime television. But we have rarely heard the brutal, unfiltered truth from the people who actually live it every single day on the hardwood, until right now. Lexie Hull, the sharpshooting defensive anchor of the Indiana Fever, and undeniably one of Caitlin Clark's closest friends on the entire roster, has just broken her silence. And what she had to say about the harsh reality of the Clark effect, the toxic narrative surrounding the league, and her ultimate commitment to returning to Indiana reveals a side of this historic team that everyone else completely missed. Before we dive deep into Lexie Hull's revelations, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You are watching WNBA Pro, the only place you need for the deepest basketball analysis on the internet. Now, let's get into the unspoken truth about the Indiana Fever.
Balls out there on that court at all times. Lexie Hull took to Sophie Cunningham's Show Me Something podcast, and she addressed the truth about being a part of Caitlin Clark's team. And make no mistake about it, Lexie Hull wants to stay. Lexie Hull wants to stay, guys. She does not want to go anywhere. She is looking to return to Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. We got to break this whole.
To truly understand the incredible magnitude of Lexie Hull's words, we have to rewind the tape and look at the foundation of this franchise. Let's be completely real for a second. Before the year 2024, the Indiana Fever were stranded in the dark basement of the WNBA. They were suffering through the middle of a brutal, unforgiving rebuild. Lexie Hull was drafted 6th overall in 2022 out of Stanford University, bringing a prestigious championship pedigree to a professional team that desperately needed a winning culture. But the transition from college to the pros is rarely a beautiful fairy tale. For 2 agonizing seasons, Hull and the Fever ground away in relative obscurity. They played incredibly hard, they fought for every possession, but the wins were scarce. And in the national media, attention was practically non-existent. Then the ping-pong balls of the draft lottery bounced their way in back-to-back years. First, they secured the dominant interior presence of Lilia Boston. And then the seismic shift happened. Caitlin Clark arrived. Virtually overnight, the Indiana Fever went from being an absolute afterthought on League Pass to the undisputed main event of American sports culture. The transition was violent, rapid, and overwhelming. And for the veteran players and the young core who were already in that locker room, the adjustment period was something absolutely no one could have prepared for. Every single missed shot was overanalyzed. Every single hard foul on Caitlin Clark sparked a 3-day national television debate. Every rotation by the coaching staff, every substitution, and every tiny facial expression on the bench was dissected by millions of brand new fans who were watching the WNBA for the very first time. It is incredibly easy to look at the sold-out arenas and the chartered flights and think that these players have it made. But the psychological toll of playing under a microscope that intense is astronomical. You aren't just playing basketball anymore. You are participating in a massive cultural phenomenon. And if you do not have the elite mental fortitude to block out the noise, that intense spotlight will burn you alive. But instead of melting under the suffocating pressure, Lexie Hull thrived. She didn't just survive the Caitlin Clark effect, she completely weaponized it.
2,000 people in an empty gym to now every game is sold out at 18,000 plus every single night, home and away. That is a big change. Lexie Hull felt that change immediately.
It might be. It might be.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's hard. I think like once you start winning and once more people start showing up, like your experience changes.
In the modern game of basketball, there is a very specific concept known as gravity. Superstars have offensive gravity. Stephen Curry has it. LeBron James has it. And the exact moment Caitlin Clark stepped her foot onto a WNBA court, she possessed the most intense gravitational pull this league had ever witnessed. Opposing defensive coordinators were utterly terrified of her logo three-pointers. They face-guarded her at 94 feet. They aggressively blitzed her on every single pick and roll, and they sent hard, trapping double teams the very second she crossed the half-court line. Now, basketball is a numbers game. When a defense desperately commits two players to the ball handler, someone else is left wide open. But being open and actually making a professional defense pay for their mistakes are two entirely different things. Early in the season, the Indiana Fever deeply struggled with their floor spacing. Opponents actively dared Indiana's role players to shoot from the perimeter. They packed the paint to completely neutralize Aaliyah Boston and aggressively trapped Caitlin on the outside. The Fever desperately needed a pressure release valve. They needed a cold-blooded killer on the wing. Enter Lexie Hull. Lexi's elite basketball IQ, honed over years under legendary coach Tara Vandiver at Stanford, kicked into maximum overdrive. She recognized exactly what the Clark effect meant from a tactical standpoint. It meant if you run the floor as hard as you can in transition, Caitlin will magically find you. It meant if you smartly relocate to the corner when Caitlin drives into the paint, the basketball will hit you perfectly right in the shooting pocket. Lexie fully embraced the vital role of the ultimate 3D enforcer. Defensively, she morphed into an absolute menace, willingly taking the hardest perimeter defensive assignments night in and night out. She fought through brutal screens. She constantly disrupted passing lanes, and she sacrificed her body, diving on the hardwood for loose balls. Offensively, she transformed into an elite sniper. Her three-point shooting percentage skyrocketed to the top of the league charts, making her one of the most efficient and lethal spot-up shooters in the entire WNBA. When you listen to Lexie speak about playing with Caitlin, you hear the absolute, unwavering trust between them. This wasn't a forced, awkward partnership. It was pure, organic basketball synergy. The exact moment Lexie started brutally punishing defenses for doubling Caitlin, the entire geometry of the basketball court opened up for the Indiana Fever offense. But the beautiful synergy between Hull and Clark was absolutely not just built on the hardwood. In fact, the most crucial and revealing part of Lex's brutal honesty about the Caitlin Clark effect has absolutely nothing to do with X's and O's. It has everything to do with what actually happens when the stadium lights go dark and the television cameras are finally turned off.
Do their thing, but when you have players that are going to go take the charge, like, you're just so tough, and they're just like, people appreciate it, and when you have sold out crowds everywhere you go, it's just appreciated, and it feels good as players.
Now, let's be real here. Would anybody be checking for Lexie Hull had she not been Caitlin Clark's teammate? Now, we love Lexie Hull. We want her here to stay. But that goes to show the...
If you foolishly let the daytime sports media tell the story, you would naturally assume the Indiana Fever locker room was a toxic war zone. Throughout the entire historic season, talking heads in relentless clickbait articles tried desperately to push a false narrative of deep jealousy, bitter resentment, and team division. They tried to paint a disturbing picture that the veteran WNBA players deeply despised the rookies, and that Caitlin Clark was completely isolated on her own lonely island. But if you actually watch the Fever closely, if you carefully observe their body language on the bench and their genuine interactions off the court, a completely different, beautiful reality emerges. And Lexie Hull is the living, breathing proof that the media's toxic narrative was completely fabricated for cheap clicks. Lexie and Caitlin naturally formed a profound bond that quickly became the emotional anchor for the entire Indiana Fever franchise. They became inseparable road trip buddies, hilarious TikTok partners, and incredibly close best friends. In a grueling season defined by unbearable national pressure and constant suffocating scrutiny, their authentic friendship became a safe sanctuary. That right there is the brutal honesty the sports world desperately needed to hear. While analysts and television studios were busy trying to tear the team apart for higher ratings, Lexie Hull and the rest of the resilient Fever roster were busy building an impenetrable fortress around their rookie point guard. Lexie deeply understands something fundamental about championship-winning teams. You simply cannot win a ring if your locker room is fractured.